Just a slight apology to make on behalf of the examiner to those people who had to get up at 6:30 this morning. The reason for that was my fault. I had a quick word with Ryan Tuberty, and he told me, look, you're far better interviewing Ronan O'Gara at 8:30 in the morning rather than 8:30 at night. So you can blame me for that. Rog.
Donald.
Before I let it go, there was just in the context of that, I thought Pat asked Ruby one interesting question in relation to his wife. Any pressure at home? I was just thinking the same thing. You don't have to answer that, by the way.
It's amazing. I suppose I went back to Paris and I rang Jess after the interview, and thankfully she was asleep with JJ in JJ's bed. So I said, "How would you get on?" She asked me, "How would you get on?" No, Jesus.
Jesus. Thought he was going to Northampton.
It's Rugby World Cup 2007 all over again, is it? I take JJ ahead of Stringer, though. So, yeah, it was a silly comment, obviously, but I had 2 coffees. People thought I was on the sauce for the evening. I think I thought it was a bit of crack. It was obviously wasn't the best of comments, but I think I'm with Jessica 19 years, so she knows me pretty well at this stage. I've said worse things, so I don't really. If people give out about it, that's their problem. I don't really have an issue with it. She didn't have an issue with it, and Saturday was a normal day for me.
Good, that's that put to bed
yeah,
anyway.
Exactly.
Literally. It's hard to believe it's a year since you turned up here in Aldi's Finest, and you were 6 months into the job in Racing. 12 months on, you're in the top 4 and the top 14. You're unbeaten in the Champions Cup. You're #1 seed going into the quarter-final. It's been an incredible year, and you're 12 months down the road in your coaching experience. What has changed in Racing from last year to this year?
I think a lot has changed. I think I suppose the first thing is I've changed. I'm finished at rugby, you know what I mean? I'm not a player, and that takes a while to adapt. I think you see things very differently. Ruby's in the heat of the moment now. He's an athlete, he's competing. I think, unfortunately, I've lost that, but I get a buzz out of the coaching side of it now, but it's very, very different mindset. You see things differently. I think you got a bit more composed, calm. I wasn't composed in the late, obviously, but you see things differently.
You haven't been cited for about 4 months, so you're definitely
no, but sure, that's easy to know. I stupidly placed myself down in the technical area on the pitch, and it's just not possible when you're a player for as long as I was. Just you kind of think you're still involved, you know what I mean? So I know I go up to the stand with the computer, and it's just logical that you just make that transition into seeing the game differently. So. Yeah, you just can't abuse fourth officials. It doesn't serve any purpose, and you're just driving home at night saying, what am I doing? And you just, as Ruby said, you learn from these things and it doesn't happen again.
But even
Sorry, getting back to your question, what has changed? I think the whole thing changed. There was obviously the 2 cast coaches came in as the 2 head coaches of Racing Metro, so they're the bosses. Forwards coach, backs coach, and there was 2 of them, and they have their 3 strength and conditioning coaches, so that's a 5-man team, okay? But they've come in, and there was 40 new players to them. Obviously 1 or 5 of them maybe had come from cast, so it was a whole new operation, and I suppose the biggest thing why teams succeed is trust, but there was little or no trust, little or no culture, little or no proper environment, little or no accountability. So you work hard on that, and yeah, I think we're going well, but the Northampton game was a bit of a, I'd say if we played them 5 times, I wouldn't be too sure would we win the other 4, you know.
It's a bit like Tommy Kiernan said in an interview years ago when Ireland were preparing to play Australia. He said, well, I tell you, he said, every 3 or 4 times you'd play Australia, you'd beat them 9 times out of 10. Which myself and Mosfin, who were being interviewed at the time, were scratching our heads wondering what that meant. But Just, just obviously Ireland played France recently. It must have been nice from your own point of view. A lot of the Racing players within France spoke very highly of you and what you've brought to the table in Racing. And you talk about culture. It's amazing to me, when I saw one of the innovations that you brought in was when you're driving home in the team bus, you sing a few songs. I mean, these are things that would come naturally to any Irish group, any Irish team. But obviously the culture over there is different and certainly was different to the team element and the togetherness that you were used to, let's say, having been in a Munster dressing room for 15 years.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing. It's worlds apart. It's incredible. You literally have to live it to kind of believe. Some days you're kind of going, is this actually happening? Is this what happens in the rugby club? And I think, obviously, for me, I was in Munster all my career and there was special players there and there was a great environment there created by past players. But there's an awful lot of turnover in the top 14. A lot of journeyman players just move on because there's 14 clubs. So they have the option of going from, Bayonne to Oyonnax for an extra, 20 grand a month or 20 grand a year or whatever. So you'd have a bracket of players that do that. And then, for example, in Racing Metro, there's no accountability though. There's no supporters. So if you have a bad game on a Saturday, the boys just rock into the club and they don't pass anyone because of the volume of people in Paris. So at the same time, the checks arrive every month. So they're not too bothered, that kind of way. But there's a great core of players there that are ambitious, that want to win things, and they're the people you need to work on. But the biggest problem, if you want to win things, are your numbers 30 to 40. If they're in a good headspace, I think then you're capable of doing something. Because if you have 15 fellas not participating in the group, it's you won't get over the line.
And just in relation to the Champions Cup, the quarter-final, you're playing Saracens, who obviously were in Munster's pool. Will you be talking to any of the Munster people in terms of, their experiences?
I will, because in fairness to Munster and the fellas there, like their analysis will be top notch, would be ahead of probably the French analysis in terms of what goes on. So it's always great to get as much information as you can and use it accordingly. But it's amazing, like the draw for the semi-final has been done already, so Claremont have the home draw in the semi-final, and people in Racing are thinking like it's going to be Racing against Claremont, but I'd be very careful of that, I just think it's typical of the French to kind of think that because we finished first in our group, we're going to beat Saracens, but I think people who know their rugby know that that'll be a game they could easily win.
And just one last question on the Racing setup. I mean, obviously, you're there. You seem to be committed for the long haul. Jess and the kids, they're learning French. The young kids now, I know I met one or two of them. They have more French than you have at this stage. But some of the overseas players, like, in fairness, you got rid of Johnny within the 2-year period, which, was one of your goals. You got rid of Dan Lydiate within 6 months, having come from Alliance Tour. And now I see Jamie Roberts is talking about maybe being either let go or going at the end of the year. Did they find it difficult to fit into the French culture? Is it more difficult as an overseas player to fit into it as opposed to being on the management?
Well, it's very different, I think, and every case is very individual. Dan Lydiate is an extremely good defensive player. In terms of, I suppose, what the boss wanted there, he probably wasn't the description of player he felt, so it was just a case of he had so much respect for Dan that he wanted Dan to play, and he couldn't guarantee him game time, and Dan wanted to play, so they came to an arrangement. Johnny's case is very different. Johnny wants to play for Leinster, and Johnny's done 2 years, so he's going back, unfortunately, from my point of view, because he's a good player, and there aren't many very good 10s out there at the minute, so it's someone that's hard to replace. Obviously, Dan Carter is coming in, so it's a big positive, but it'll be interesting to see what shape physically and mentally he arrives in.
But I suppose it's an endorsement of where Racing are now.
No, it's the president's dream. It's very different. The club is run by one man and his wife, so like this is his dream. He doesn't. This is all live.
It's okay, we're speaking English. They'll never understand us in Para.
I've heard that from them before as well. They use that very well. So it's his basically dream to, you know what I mean, everyone in World Rugby knows, that, you know, there's one Dan Carter, so he's the kind of, when you mention rugby, his name is to the forefront. So it was his dream to have Dan Carter. So he's opening a new arena in the kind of the business centre in Paris, an incredible setup, a new stadium, a new concert. So it's 40,000 people for a concert, 32,000 for rugby matches. And so on the Friday night, what will happen will be that Racing will play the All Blacks and Dan will play a half for either team. And on the Saturday, I think Rolling Stones will play in the arena, and that's just how he operates.
Yeah, I think for Musgrave Park we had the Divas and we got Zebra and the Dragons to open it, so it probably puts things into perspective. Moving on from Racing, you've started a new career in RTE. You know, after all those years, looking up at the panel and saying what a show of wankers they were. You know, find yourself in your lovely, fantastic new grey suit, I have to say, which is obviously. Yeah. But just in terms of, you know, you've survived the wrath of George. The first time I ever went in, before going on a panel for a Six Nations game, I remember we had a meeting on the Friday, and Tom McGurk was sitting in the office in RT, and I came in, and he goes, "Oh, Jesus," he says, "George won't like seeing you here." So I said, "What do you mean?" So I go in anyway, and I sat down, and George came in, followed by Brent Pope, and George said, "Lanahan, you're in the guest seat tomorrow." Just to make you feel warm and comfortable, you see. Yeah. To which he said, "I'm in the number 1 seat." And then Brent Pope came back straight away and he said, "I should be in the number 1 seat because I'm here longer than you, George." This actually happened, so I'm scratching my head and saying, Jesus, this panel definitely needs a change. But you've survived. Is your perspective different now from the inside looking out? You know, obviously you're still very close to the players. You have a voice in the dressing room, a lot of players that you would have played with. So, you know, how have you managed to make the transition?
I think it's very easy. I think it's how you say things. You know, I think the people that were good at rugby, I think they can speak their opinion. It's people who want to sensationalise things, and you know what I mean, are getting paid to create controversy. I don't think players respect that, and it's easy to identify who those people are. But for yourself, Michael Lina, plenty of people, I think they can be very constructive about what they say, and the player knows he hasn't played well. I don't think you need to ram it down his throat. I think you can offer solutions of what he could have done better perhaps, and players wouldn't have a problem with that. It's just it's the general sweeping perceptive comments that are offering nothing. So I think it's very important when you're sitting in that chair just to remember it actually isn't that easy when you're on the pitch and you've split seconds to make decisions, and there's 29 other people with their own goals trying to achieve something out of today. So we're all experts when we're sitting there. Well, certainly when I am there, drinking coffee and eating Mars bars, it's a great Saturday afternoon to watch sport.
Well, how long did it take you to realise that George doesn't actually watch the game when it's on? I mean, he's normally tweeting, or there are times when he's actually fallen asleep in the seat. But
no, that isn't the joke. Like, he could be watching golf. But I think, to be fair to him, what happens is that I think. Well, the way I see it, George doesn't really talk. He talks about history and entertaining, and I think that combines well with people hopefully who know what they're talking a small bit about. Because if it's three rugby knows is talking about rugby, you don't have that same dynamic when George just shites on about whatever he wants to shite on about. It just, you laugh and then you can get back to the serious side of things. But all of something isn't the same, you know. You need to have a little bit of counterfire.
And just the touchline role. I mean, I was down with you soon after Ireland won the championship in Paris last year. It's a little bit more. It's a bit different down there. You're almost within touching distance of the players. You see them warming up, coming into the, that 5 minutes before they go into the dressing room. But, after that game in Paris last year, you were like a fella ready to run on at any minute.
Yeah, I think there's been a big, probably, I've made the transition. No, I hadn't by that stage. It's only probably, I don't know, in the last, maybe after the autumn internationals or something, it's over. I've accepted it now. I know exactly where I am. But as you said back then, yeah, exactly. You're kind of thinking, geez, you'd love to be there and I'd love to play, and you kind of feel you're jealous of them, literally. But now you kind of come to the realization that my time was fantastic, and you want these guys to maximise every opportunity they get.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit easier too when you see about 5 fellas being carried off to the concussion bin in every game. The whole physicality of the game is something that, there's been a lot of focus on it recently. I mean, you're not even 2 years out of the game yet, but it seems to have gone up to another level even in that period. I mean, are we in danger of a player losing, a player being seriously injured or even killed in rugby at the moment, the way it's going?
I'd hope not. I don't think so. I think obviously there's a massive focus on it at the minute, don't I? But I think you go back to even the 2003 World Cup. Like that was, I was looking over old videos, like the amount of belts fellas were getting in that competition. It's just now that the media is all over this. But like even from rugby, I don't think very little has changed. Everyone's getting stronger. It's not certain players are getting stronger. So they're doing more weights, they're doing more training, but at the same time, everyone is doing it. So it doesn't create any mismatches. And I think the idea of there not being enough space in the pitch is just not accurate. I think what's possibly happening at the minute is that I think creatively, it's I don't think they are as creative in the last. Players coming into the game now aren't as creative maybe as players who were natural at the start of the time from 2000 onwards, maybe because of the emphasis is on strength. You look at the Munster Academy, you look at all the academies, how many players can pass comfortably left to right, right to left. You look at all the professional squads, it's a basic requirement, but like the skill levels of.
But it seems something that's well more particular to the Northern Hemisphere, maybe South Africa as well. But I know Mills Muliaina, who's in Connacht now, he couldn't believe the emphasis on bulking and conditioning in terms of overweight training. Compared to what they do it in New Zealand, but as you say, the emphasis. If you look at New Zealand, their forwards have got leaner while everybody else have got bigger. They've retained the skill levels.
And that's the big difference. You look at the last try they scored in the Aviva, how many forwards passed the ball from left to right, right to left under the most intense pressure. And that's, Ireland didn't lose that game. Well, Ireland were 19 up and should never have lost that game, but you have to admire just the inner belief coupled with the skill level, how they produced under pressure. And that's the big difference with them. Obviously, the weather conditions are different over there, and there's far more tactical battles in Northern Hemisphere rugby, but it's certainly the biggest growth area that can happen in rugby is literally past development.
And just brings us nicely to Sunday, I think, because everybody's looking forward to the game, but we don't think it's going to be a running spectacle. I mean, both teams have been pretty pragmatic. Must be a bit strange for you in a way, because the new hero of English rugby, one of the key players on Saturday is George Ford, who used to, when you were practicing your kicking with Ireland, he was the 10-year-old ball boy bringing him back to you. And I noticed he commented favourably in terms of like a lot of things, even as a young fella. Just to explain to the general public, George Ford's father, Mike Ford, was the defence coach for Ireland from about 2004 onwards. And he spoke in glowing terms for you, but he said that Peter Stringer was the only one that used to bring him away and buy him ice cream during the break. You didn't seem to do a whole lot for him. You didn't give him any old fiver. Of course, you didn't need the father's vote. Maybe that was the difference.
I don't know. There's two things there. Strings had probably done his 100 passes. He didn't have much else to do in his game. And secondly, you can be sure Strings didn't buy him ice cream. He obviously got money off Rala because he fucking has his communion money.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what's right.
He doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke. He wants to play till he's 50. Yeah, see where you're coming from. Obviously, I mean, there's two big omissions on either side for Sunday. Mike Brown is out for England. Jamie Heaslip is out for Ireland. Two massive losses. In your opinion, who's the bigger loss and how do you see the game going?
I think Mike Brown is a great player. Great player. I think he's been really good for a number of years now, and it's always handy to have a left-footed kicker, especially in your back three. Just, you know what I mean, if you're the opposite for Rob Kearney, it's very hard to know. Well, if you manipulate the first two phases, where you're going to kick, because as you say, people talk about not being space, but Rob Kearney is whatever 80 metres of space to look after back there in the zone. So surely you can create something where George Ford can play to the right-hand side, Mike Brown can play to the left-hand side. So if you're hopefully average at kicking a ball, there's 30 yards to kick it into. But yeah, it's amazing, all right, how simple things can be done in terms of if you have your left winger there, right winger there, to manipulate the defence. Who are you asking about, Jamie?
Yeah, Jamie Heaslip, beat last for Ireland.
Yeah, because he's been there, I suppose, and he just gets through an awful amount of work, and it's a big opportunity for I think it's Jordy Murphy coming in, isn't it? But you know, you look there of how physical the game is going, but sure, Jordy Murphy be half the size of David Wallace, and you know what I mean, or Quinney, or Foley, or Victor Costello. So these players have been around for the last 15 years. Like these fellas are conditioned, definitely, but that's why I think the argument doesn't stack up. Like you look at the Munster pack that played in front of me, they were all monsters, you know.
And just obviously, you know, I mentioned Johnny Sexton. I mean, his performance against France last time out. I mean, obviously you had a bigger insight in that you knew the training that he was doing and the 12 weeks that he was out. But I mean, his performance was phenomenal in the context of not playing a game and then going straight into an international test match, given the injury that he took in the middle of the game, going back out, retaining his composure. Have you seen a growth in his game and his overall influence even in the 2 years that you've been working with him?
Yeah, but I think there's a message there in terms of injury. I think because it was a head injury, but he didn't have any symptoms. I think the smartest thing he did, or hopefully I contributed small bit to, was he had 12 weeks. So in any sport, if you have 12 weeks, it's a massive opportunity to grow your game. So he essentially did the right training, and he had a massive opportunity because he was involved in all the ball work and skill work. So if you kind of go, I'm going to go hard now for 4 weeks, 1 week down, going hard for another 4 weeks. It was no surprise to me he hit the ground running, because if you put that amount of work in the bank and do the right amount of work, it has to stand to you. So he was going to come in sharp, fresh. This getting up to speed of game time, it can be a bit of a myth at times. I think if you back yourself, you can do it no problem. Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I think, from a rookie coach point of view, the faith he has in Joe Schmidt is incredible, and vice versa. I think he's the one coach. Obviously, he's won his 3 European Cup medals with him, and he's done well for Ireland with him. But he hasn't really had much time with other coaches, or much success, should we say, in terms of how he goes. So, like, that's the one fella who really, really makes him tick, I think, because when he comes to racing, Johnny is hyper organised. It's tack, tack, tack. It's everything, and that's how he plays. And I think that's what Schmidt delivers to him. So he grows and he gets huge confidence from that.
So finally, I mean, even the bookies, a lot of talk about the bookies here today. They can't separate the two teams for Sunday. Just a quick overall view. How do you think it's going to go?
I think it'll be interesting. I'm fascinated to see I suppose just the mental battle. The last time I think George Ford had a big game was, it's hopefully from his point of view similar to me in terms of I think he played a big final at the Amlin last May, and he had a shocker off the tee. when you know, I mean, pressure only arrives once or twice a season, real pressure, and that was the time when it didn't go well for him. But if he's learned the right messages, because England going to Wales won't be the same as England going to Ireland. It's a different. That's in a bus. They'll have to get on a plane this time, and it's different. The Aviva, I think, will be heated on Sunday. There'll be a great atmosphere there, and he's with Dave Aldridge, you know, the kicking guru. But I don't know how much natural kicking is left at this stage after working with him. So I'm fascinated to see will that withstand a really intense atmosphere, because I think Johnny will kick well. Ireland will be, I think we know what we'll get from Ireland at this stage. There's just no errors in the game. It's very hard to kind of get 18 or 20 points out of Ireland, so he's going to have to kick 5 out of 6 at least for this. So I think Ireland by 4.
There you have it. Raj, thank you.
Cheers, Don. Thanks.